we'll start off with the exam review session overall. So there's some questions that you will not have been able to find until this session on the prep assignment, the preparation for exam assignment, okay? So we're gonna go through the logistics of the exams. So for your lecture exam, it has 50 questions. Of the 50 questions, there are 40 that are multiple choice and 10 that are fill-in. So there'll be a question, make sure you you type in the answer fully, okay? So what you're gonna see is that you're gonna see the first 40 multiple choice first, and then the last 10 questions are the fill-in the questions, okay? How are the questions divided? Do I emphasize one chapter over the other? The answer is no, okay? So the chapters that are on this exam include intro, chem, cells, tissue, and the integumentary. So that means that there are 5 chapters and 50 questions, which means each chapter is going to have how many questions? If I divide it evenly.
10.
Yes, ma'am. So there's going to be 10 questions on each chapter. Okay. And the questions would be pulled from each of the topic content. So that's why when students ask me, you know, what should they study? What should they focus on? Everything. Particularly since your exam is done as a pool of questions. So we write questions based on everything that we cover in your lecture videos. Okay, so you want to focus on the lecture content that's provided on Canvas. The script, so each module has the script, the PowerPoint, the outline, and the videos. That's the content I'm going to focus on. There are reading assignments associated below there with the pages. Now, I noticed that the page, one of your classmates identified that the pages don't match, and I'm trying to work on that to fix that. But the good note is that because this class covers all the body systems, we can't do it in as much detail as is in the textbook. So really, if you want to prepare for the exams, focus 100% on the lecture videos on Canvas, the script, the PowerPoint, the outlines. The reading materials that are associated with your textbook should be considered as supplemental. So let's say you listen to the video and there's something that you didn't understand or you want more examples, that's when you go into the textbook, okay? So 100% of the exam questions will come out of the lecture video, script, PowerPoint, outline, whatever we provide on Canvas, okay? What else? There are some exceptions to that because in the next unit, you're going to have joint movements. That one we don't cover as a lecture, but I do require you to know for the exam, and that's why it's part of your video assignment. And it will state it directly on the assignment that this is something you have to do kind of on your own, use your textbook. It is not covered in the lecture, but we do expect you to know it for the exam. So that is the only one exception. Otherwise, everything else comes directly, your quizzes, your exams comes directly from the lecture PowerPoints. Okay, the lecture itself, the lecture video, PowerPoint, script, outlines. Questions? Okay. So as I said earlier, they are randomized. So I don't even know what to tell you, what to focus on, because in each of those chapters, 10 questions will be automatically pulled out from a pool of questions, okay? So the best way to prepare is just to kind of go through everything in that lecture script, lecture video, and then go from there, all right? Now, what you will see is that you will see one question at a time. Okay, you can go back, but I do not recommend it, okay, because you are taking this exam online, and especially if you have weak internet, weak connection, if you go back and forth between question to question, it might, disconnect you. Okay, so the recommendation that I have is start from either number 1 or start from the very beginning, number 1, or start at the very end, number 50, and then go in the other direction. Okay, so you will see one question at a time. You can move back and forth, but I don't recommend it, especially if you have weak connection. Okay, in addition to that, any questions that you've seen already, and if you do get disconnected, I can't let you retake the exam. Okay, but if, let's say, you just took questions 1 through 10, you didn't see any of the other questions and you got disconnected, if it's a valid reason, or you notify if it is valid within the accepted reasons, what I can do is that I can open up that exam for you start, and you can start from the question that you left off because you haven't seen the question yet. Okay, so there are some benefits to doing one question at a time and just taking them one at a time in a row, and not seeing all the questions and then going back and forth to fill them in. Okay. What else? So one question at a time. You can move between questions, but it's not recommended. What else? Any questions about your lecture exam? Okay. Then for your lab exam, it's going to be 30 questions. They are all type in questions. So you have to type in the terms. It's going to include things from chapter 1, the terminology, what's anterior, what's posterior, what region is the armpit, what cavity, and so on. And then it will also include things from the cells. What organelle is this? What tissue is this? And so on. Now, a few of you talked about tissues in terms of being able to identify what's stratified and what is simple, and between all of those, tissues is a very hard one as well. So I'm going to recommend that if you haven't had a chance to do it yet, go to the announcements page, go to histology and the integumentary system, and you will see some supplemental videos that I made specifically for this class. So the videos that you see on Canvas, it's pretty much this is this, this is this. It doesn't tell you how to be able to differentiate it. You're oftentimes going to see images, multiple images of the same thing, and you'll need to be able to identify it, because we want you to move beyond having to memorize that exact picture is what skeletal muscle looks like. We want for you to be able to see any picture that's a skeletal muscle and be able to identify it, because skeletal muscle is striated, it's multinucleated, so you have to know those characteristics. And in these videos, it will help to point out what characteristics to pay attention to. Okay, so particularly this histology lab video. So one of your classmates talked about the different types of tissues and having difficulties kind of differentiating what they are. I walk through that in these videos. So make sure that you take a look at these. So there's one for the histology lab video, and then there's one of the cytology, where I actually go through the cell worksheet. Okay. All right. Then let's go back to here. Let's move this down here. So for the lab is 30 questions. I'll type in. It's going to be divided evenly between the intro terms, the organelles, and the different types of tissue. So same thing. There's 3 main chapters, and that's what you'll see 10 questions from each one. For the lab exam, spelling counts. So make sure that you are practicing your spelling as well as your identification. Okay. And I know that there are a lot of students that struggle with the spelling. There's a lot of strategies, particularly for whatever situation that you're in. I would recommend YouTubing it to kind of figure out how people did it. and then just researching kind of how to get over it. You can't really get over it if it's a condition, but to adapt to it. All right. So there's lots of different strategies, and the different strategies are going to be different for what your needs are. So I would recommend looking that up. Okay. What else? So lab exam, I'll type in spelling counts. What else? Any questions about the exams? So same thing, one question at a time. And you are allowed to move between questions, but same thing. I do not recommend it, because especially if you have weak internet connection. Okay. You can take the exam anytime in any order between midnight Sunday, so that's like 11:59 p.m. on Saturday, all the way up until Monday 11 p.m. Central Standard Time. I do not recommend waiting until like 10 p.m. Monday to take the exams, okay? Because a lot of things can happen and it's late. IT is going to be closed. So, take the exams wisely in terms of like when you're going to take it. If you are in Minnesota and want to take it with the Learning Center, make sure that you schedule with them well in advance, and they'll contact me, and then we'll work something out in terms of when you would take it. Okay, because then I'll have to I'll have to change the setting on the computer for you. For both of them, it's really important that you know that you have to use Respondus Lockdown. You have to have your webcam on. Your webcam, you should always be in view. If it's going to flag you if you turn right and left, look down, look up, but that's okay, because in addition to the webcam, I'm going to require that you do a thorough environmental scan. I gave you an example of what an environmental scan looks like. If you don't know, go back to the announcements page, go to the exams, and it'll show you a video of what one looks like. Okay, so that environmental scan, I don't look at it unless Respondus Lockdown flags you. Okay, but just to make sure that you are on the right track for this first one and subsequent ones, I'm going to have the TAs look at all of them just to make sure that you are doing the appropriate environmental scans. Okay, so the TAs will be reviewing these to make sure that you are doing correct ones. In my syllabus, I do say that unless you do a proper environmental scan, your exams will not be graded. Okay, so make sure that you look through what is expected. The TAs will look through your environmental scans, and then I'll contact you if something happens. Okay, questions?
We're allowed a scratch paper, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Great question. You are allowed scratch paper. The only thing you can have a writing utensil, pen, pencil, you can have scratch paper. And what you would do is just at the beginning during the environmental scan, you would show the front and the back to show that there's nothing on it. And then you can have your pencil, you can have food near you. The only thing that you can't have is your cell phone. There shouldn't be any notes, any books. Show me your desk table, show me what's in front of you, what's around you. If you tend to look around a lot, that's fine. Just include it in the environmental scan so that if you do look around, I'll just say there was nothing that you're looking at. You're just thinking. Okay. So really the environmental scan is meant for your protection than anything else. Okay. Questions? Other questions?
I was gonna say, I do look around a lot because I'm ADD, so that's my problem that I have. So I do look around. I be very fidgety, so it's. I just wanted to make that clear.
Yes, ma'am. So then in your environmental scan, you want to make sure you're really thorough and do show me everywhere, So if
Yes,
you are
ma'am.
looking
Yes,
around, you're
ma'am.
not looking at anything. Oh, and you can have
Yes,
fidget
ma'am.
toys with you too.
Okay.
If you can have any toys or what, like one of those
Okay.
spinners. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Because I
Yep.
do, like I said, I look around, but I do pick up my laptop and I just like, short around. But
Yep.
I look around a lot. I be like, I don't know. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. I
Okay.
find that whenever I take exams, I like to have food, so I always have something to eat.
Yeah, I do
Yep.
too. I snack a lot. So okay.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So you can eat during the exam all you want. Yep.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a
Oh,
question.
yes, of course.
On the environmental scans, if we've been doing them right, you said on the quizzes, we've been doing them right. You said if they've been graded, so you don't grade them until you check the environmental scan.
No, this is only for exams. So for quizzes, I don't require environmental scans. You can do it just to kind of get used to doing it, but I don't require them on quizzes. So I don't use them to determine whether your quizzes, I just grade your quizzes as is.
Okay, because I've been doing them and I don't know if I've been doing them right. So that's not
Um,
something you look at.
You can email me and I will look at it.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
I live in a tiny home, so I don't have like a desk. I have literally a couch and what do you call it, a TV tray. So I know like the respondent says don't be on your bed or on the couch, but I literally have no other place unless I'm standing in my kitchen. So I'll just do the best I can, because I was going to ask what she did with the quizzes. That's where I've been taking them. But yeah, so just yeah, I live in a shoebox. So
Yeah. Like 50% of the students in this past semester took it on a couch, took their exam on a couch. They just showed me what's around them, that there's nothing around them. So don't worry about it. It doesn't have to be at a table. It could be at a couch. It could be on your bed. I had some students like had to have their baby next to them even, and that's fine. That's why the environmental scan, just make sure that I know that there's nothing around you, even if you end up having to like take care of your child during the exam or do whatever else you have to do. Yep. So that's completely fine. Yeah. And if your child walks in, your spouse walks in, someone interrupts, that doesn't mean that you just failed your exam. It doesn't. No, just make sure that you're not talking to them anything about relevant exam questions. Yeah. Okay. So the main things are no notes, no cell phones, no textbook. Besides that, it's fine. That's why you have the environmental scan to kind of back you up that you were academically honest. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions before I move on?
No.
Okay. So I typed it all up and I will give you the recording of this as well as the PowerPoint, so you have it all there. So again, it goes to the content, the time frame. You have 50 minutes on the lecture exam. You have 45 minutes on the lab exam, unless you qualify for extended test taking time. If you do, please, please, please make sure you make use of it. Okay. And how do you make use of it? You contact the Learning Center and they'll walk you through whether you qualify or not. And if you do, you absolutely should make use of it. Okay. Logistics have respondents lockdown, webcam. The exams will not be graded unless you have the environmental scan. Oh, troubleshooting. If something does happen, and it might, if it does happen, don't panic. Rather than emailing me, I would suggest you texting me though. So text me right away, and then I'll see if I can work with IT to help you, or if there's anything that I can help you troubleshoot. Just stay calm, and just text me right away. You probably will not get a reply if you text me at 5 a.m, but, so kind of keep that in mind, but I will reply to you as soon as I can. Technical difficulties, don't wait until the last minute to take the exam. Stay calm, text me if something happens. My recommendations, do the 5-day study plan. Study, assess and review, and study the oldest or the hardest material first, and then study complete chapters. Don't study out of sync, because it's already a lot of content. And if you study a little bit of chapter 1, a little bit of chapter 3, the things mix up and then it'll get confusing. Okay. So divide so you have this week, right? You have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Divide up the chapters, and study the whole chapter in one. And that's why I know that some instructors believe that you should know the questions in any order. I think that's just extra stress on students. So that's why I purposely put all the chapters for one questions together. So the first 8 questions that you see will be of intro, then the second one will be of chemistry, the third one will be this. So it helps, ease some anxiety out of that. What else? All right, so let's go right into it. So in the introduction, make sure that you know the scientific method, the terms and definitions, be able to define anatomy and physiology. What's anatomy, by the way?
Study of the body.
What specifically of the body?
The muscles and the bones.
Structure, where things are.
There you go. So anatomy specifically is the study of the structure, right? It's like the heart, the lung, the lung has so many lobes. That's anatomy. Where physiology then would be the study of
how things work.
Yes, exactly. So respiration would be physiology, okay? Make sure you know the levels of hierarchy. What's the smallest to what's the largest? Like in one of your exam questions that might pop up is, what is the smallest living structure? What would you say?
An atom.
No, ma'am.
Ooh.
Keep at it.
A cell.
A cell, exactly. So although an atom is the smallest unit, the cell is the smallest unit to be considered living. So that was so thank you for your answer, because that was a perfect example of how sometimes you know the answer, but you read the question too fast. Okay, so make sure you're reading the question thoroughly so you know what it's asking before you select an answer. Okay, so if the question, and it has been in the past, what's the smallest unit, then you would say an atom. Versus if it says what's the smallest living, then you would say a cell. Or if it asks you what comes to what do you have when organs come together and provide a specific function, what would you say? An organ system, right? So those are the types of questions that you might see from that bullet point, okay? Homeostasis is huge. You're going to see questions on it. I guarantee you will see homeostasis questions. It could be, what is the definition of homeostasis? It could be pure regurgitation, like which of the following is the definition of homeostasis? And you would need to know that it's the ability to maintain stable internal environments. Or I can give an example. Blood clotting, fever responses, childbirth, and blood pressure. Which one would be an example of negative feedback?
Blood
The
pressure.
negative feedback. Sorry.
Fever.
Fever is positive feedback.
Contractions.
That's also positive feedback.
Kind of remember it by something bad kind of happening, and then the body kind of, so with positive feedback you have something like giving birth, something is helping you give birth, so that's positive. But negative is like if you have like a high or low blood sugar, something is going against that to make it go back to normal levels.
Yep. So which one of those 4 that I said would be an example of that?
The blood pressure.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Now here's the good thing. For those of you who are participating, they say that if you answer during like a review session or a talking session, if you get it wrong, you are 70% more likely to get it right on the exam. So keep giving me answers, okay? Because you'll remember that, oh, I picked that wrong. So what was the right answer again? So always participate. All right. So like you said, negative feedback senses a change in the body, and then it activates mechanisms to bring you back to your average. Okay, where positive feedback can always be life-threatening. Can blood clots be life-threatening? Absolutely. It's meant to save you if you're bleeding, but it can also lead to clots that can cause you to die. Can giving birth kill you? Absolutely. The point is you need to push the child out, but at the same time, that could lead to death. So positive feedback tend to be life-threatening, but it is a regular processes of the body. So whenever you move away from negative feedback, you should associate with that with like illness or conditions where it's life-threatening. In other words, it's positive feedback. Okay. All right. Make sure you know the terms. There's lots of terms in the introduction. It's memorization. Do flashcards, do Quizlets. Yeah. Chemistry. Like I said, this one for me was the most difficult when I was going through this course. So I would recommend setting aside more time to study it. Lots of terms: atoms, ions, molecules, solutes. I'll share one example of a way to remember it. So cation are positively charged ions because they're the plus sign in the T. You can see the plus right there, right here. Where anions then would be the negatively charged ions. Know what solutes are, what solvents are, and all the other terms within chemistry. Be able to know what a molecule is and the state of the molecule. Is it stable? Is it neutral? What do molecules prefer to be? Stable or neutral?
Stable.
Very good. They prefer to be stable. What does stable mean?
That all of the valence electrons are full in the outermost shell because they want to be stable.
That's right. Yep. And then through knowing that also then helps you determine what chemical bonds they form. Do they form ionic bonds? Do they form covalent bonds? Do they form hydrogen bonds? So for example, a test question might be, which of the following chemical bonds is the strongest?
That would be a covalent.
Convince each other. Which one is correct?
Covalent.
Yes.
Because they're bonded.
In what way?
Because they share.
Yes. Exactly. Covalent is the strongest because they are sharing electrons. So it's not like one of my colleagues used the example of it's raining, right? And there's one umbrella, right? And if two people are using that umbrella, they're gonna stay together because they're sharing that one umbrella. Okay. Versus if a person has two umbrellas and another person that has none, and they give that umbrella away, so that's ionic, right? They don't need to stay together. They only need to stay together long enough for that one person to give away that extra umbrella. Okay, so some ways to help you remember. Okay, make sure you know pH scale. And a pH scale, P means the logarithm, and it's measuring H. What's H stand for? On the periodic table, what does H stand for?
More acidic or acidic?
It's hydrogen. Yep. Okay. So pH means the logarithmic value of hydrogen. And if you've had a lot of math, you know that the log of anything is the inverse, right? So the larger the value, the smaller the number. Okay. So if anything is really acidic, is it going to be a high number or is it going to be a low number?
Low number.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So the pH scale goes, what's the pH scale range again? What does it start off? What's the lowest and what's the highest?
0
to 7.
14. 0 to 14.
14. With 7 being?
The middle.
Yes, but what's the middle?
Neutral.
Acidic.
Yes. The 7 being neutral. So anything below 7 is acidic, and the lower you get, the more acidic it is. Anything above 7 is considered to be basic. The higher up the value goes, the more basic it is. Okay, so just remember, pH stands for the logarithmic measurement of hydrogen. The more hydrogen you have, the lower the number. The lower number, the more acidic it is. All right. Organic compounds, you did a nice table on that. Make sure you read my comments, because a lot of you had some, did a beautiful job, but maybe there was like one small thing or two things that were off, and I pointed that out for you. So make sure you read the comments, the feedback that I provide on that assignment. What else? Okay, yeah. A good idea is to make charts. You already had to do one, but do one from scratch. See if you can do it from scratch. Okay, make a chart for carbohydrates. What are their functions? What are the types and characteristics? Mono means one, and glucose, fructose, and galactose are examples of monosaccharides. And the reason why we highly recommend cognitive map, that's what this is right here, in science, is because you have so much information. And it's really hard to remember everything that's in a paragraph form. But if you separate out that paragraph into, easily to remember or to recall tables of columns, it's easier to remember that way. So whenever you see glucose, fructose, and galactose, you would associate with them as monosaccharides, because you remember, you can picture these three under monosaccharides. Where sucrose, lactose, and maltose, you can picture them in this graph under disaccharides, which could very well be a test question that you encounter. Which of the following is a monosaccharide? And I'll say sucrose, starch, glycogen, and galactose. What would you say? Which of the following is a monosaccharide?
Lactose.
Galactose.
Yes. Perfect. Or I can ask you, which of the following carbohydrate can you eat but not ingest? Or not digest?
Lactose?
Nope.
Cellulose.
Cellulose. That's right. That's why it acts as dietary fiber. It helps to clean out your colon, because we don't have the enzyme to break down the cellulose. We can eat it, but we can't digest it. Starch is the only form that we eat and are able to digest. Okay? So make this table. Let's see if I can, I meant to show you the lower side of the table. Well, you would finish this table out. So you have carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acid. Okay. All right. Moving on to cells. I don't think any of you commented on struggling with cells, so I'm just going to briefly go through this. Oh, a lot of you made some of the most amazing videos I've seen in my 25 years of teaching this class. They were so creative. So I love watching your videos. There was one in particular. I try not to point out one in particular, but there was one that I was just extremely floored by. I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch it, but if you haven't, make sure you watch it. They made it into like a sim game. Do you know what I'm talking about? One of your classmates.
Yes, I
Okay.
remember that one. It was
I
really
watched that one.
cool.
I remember who did it too.
Who was it?
It was Michael.
Okay. I was completely floored by that. I was like, oh my God. There's a video that one of your classmates made of the cell and its organelles based on a sim game, and it looks so professional. I'm like, they don't need to go to OTA. They could make tons of money just going into animation. But anyways, okay. So a lot of you made amazing videos. So watch those, okay? But essentially for cells, make sure you know structure, function, the plasma membrane. A lot of you didn't focus, some of you did, but a lot of you didn't focus on the details of the plasma membrane. You do need to know it. Like for example, the phospholipid bilayer. Why is it faced the way it is? Because on one side it's hydrophobic on the other side is hydrophilic. So all the minute details that you see in this lecture scripts, lecture videos, make sure you understand that, okay? Then mechanisms of transport. This one is a little bit of physiology, okay? So spend a little time on this one. What's the difference between passive and active? Then within passive, how is simple diffusion different from facilitate diffusion versus osmosis and filtration? Be able to define them and differentiate them. Then within active transport, there are two main types. There's the vascular transport, which include endocytosis and exocytosis, and just pure active transport. How's that different from passive? Okay. Organelles. I love what you did with organelles on your video as well, but there are two common mistakes that were made. So I'm going to point them out to all of you. So oftentimes, a lot of you didn't understand the function of rough endoplasmic reticulum and smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, what's the function of rough endoplasmic reticulum?
The rough ER has the ribosomes, and it makes the proteins.
No! That, by the way, thank you. That is the most, like 90% of the time when students answer that question incorrectly, that's how they answer it. Students always associate rough endoplasmic reticulum with with producing proteins. Is that true? No, they're just the site of protein synthesis, but they do not make the proteins. What actually assembles the proteins?
Nucleolus?
Nope, the nucleolus makes the ribosomes. And it is you were real close. It's the ribosomes that assemble the proteins, which is why rough endoplasmic reticulum is the site of protein synthesis, because what's on the rough ER?
Ribosomes?
Yes. Okay. So that leaves us back to, so what is the function of the rough endoplasmic reticulum? So if you can picture, just like close your eyes, imagine the cell, imagine the nucleus, and then the squiggly line all the way from the nucleus out to the plasma membrane. That's the rough ER. Because it connects from the nucleus all the way through the cell and to the plasma membrane, it's a great highway. It's a great way to transport whatever is made throughout the cell. So the function of the rough endoplasmic reticulum is to transport cellular material. Makes sense because, well, that's why it has rough. That's why it has ribosomes, because once it makes the protein is going to move through the rough ER. Okay, so it's a network of channels that helps to transport things through. Okay, smooth ER. Smooth ER, a lot of you got it right, but you oftentimes only mentioned one of the three functions. What are the three functions of smooth ER?
Store minerals.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Store minerals.
Store minerals, exactly, such as what? What's a popular mineral that it stores?
Calcium.
Yes, love it. That's one. Two more to go.
Synthesis of lipids.
Perfect. You're on a roll. You might as well do one more.
And detoxify alcohol and drugs.
That's right. And that's why if you look at your liver, what organelle do you find a lot of in your liver?
Smooth ER.
That's right. Absolutely. Makes sense. Okay. All right. The other common mistake, not mistake, but something that a lot of the class left out was the membrane. You also need to make sure you know what membrane the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi, and the mitochondria consist of. So what membrane makes up the endoplasmic reticulum, whether it's rough or smooth? What membrane is it made up of?
I'm probably pronouncing this wrong. The cisternae?
You did not pronounce it wrong. You're absolutely right. It is the cisternae. Perfect. Okay, how about the Golgi?
I think it's the same one, the cisternae.
It is the same one. And that leaves the mitochondria.
I know it starts with a C and it's a shorter letter. I just have to see it to.
Christe?
Yes, Christe, exactly. So that's what you need to do on a test too. Try to see if you can pull it up. A lot of times students don't recognize that there are 3 steps in doing well in this class. 1, studying, putting that information into your memory, right? And that's what you do when you do the worksheets, when you take notes, when you read. And you also have to do the second part, which is be able to pull that information out. And that's the recall. What helps you to recall is this session, asking you questions, having someone answer. So if you have like another person that can quiz you, or you can do Quizlet, the more you review, practicing to pull that content out, the better you're off. The third thing is test taking. There is strategies to taking a test, okay? And I'll go through some of them when we go through the practice quiz later on, okay? All right. So here's what I did for my in-person class. You know, when I was teaching this in person, I would just draw out the cell, label, and when I label it, I also wrote down the function. I highly recommend you practicing that. That's going to help you do the recall. Can you pull out what you studied? Okay, and it's in a visual form so that when you're taking the test, you can say, oh, I remember drawing that. That was this, and that was this function. Okay, so the more active learning you do, the more easier it becomes to recall the information. Because I know a lot of you, share the same stress that it's too much information. It is a lot of information. It could be worse. It really could be. This course is usually much more intense. Okay. But it is bad as it is already with all the content. So it's just a matter of, the more you expose yourself to it, the more time you allow your brain to process the information, the easier it will become. Okay. All right. Tissues. So a lot of you talked about tissues. Make sure you know the structure, the functions of the different types of tissue. How many different types of tissue do we have?
4?
4.
Yes. So although in this chapter we do cover all 4, we really focus mostly on epithelium and connective. Okay. We do talk a little bit about muscle and nervous, but because they have their own chapters, I really focus on these 2. Okay. Do cognitive maps for epithelium, do cognitive maps for connective. That's the best way I can help you, study this.
Question.
Yeah.
Okay, so like for this exam,
Yes.
because I get like the is it going to be more multiple choice for this portion, and then we need to know how to do the fine things like spelling and everything else for the lab component? Or
Yes.
do we need to be able to okay. I'm
I got
trying my
your
best.
question. No, I totally got your question. So for the lecture exam, it's mostly multiple choice, 40 multiple choice, and within the 10 spelling, as long as I understand what you are at, I actually don't even take off points for like minor spelling errors. But if you are trying to spell something and I can't even recognize it, then I can't give you the points for it. Okay.
Valid.
So the spelling is mostly focused on the lab. Yeah. So that at least is some relief. Okay. All right.
Yes, thank you.
One more
Yeah.
question, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
You might have said this earlier. I probably wasn't listening. Did you say that you were going to email us a copy of these slides that we're going over?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yep. You'll get all of this. You'll get the recording. You'll get the slides.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. So here's another thing that I did it for my in-person. So we kind of just, I gave them kind of an overview of tissues in general. So this is just an overview. You do need to know all the specific details that were covered in your lecture, but this is to give you the big picture. So you can see that tissues has 4 different types. There's epithelium in the black print, connective in the blue print, nervous in the green print, and muscular in the red print. And it kind of goes through kind of how you differentiate them. So in epithelium, make sure you know the characteristics of epithelium. Now the characteristics and functions are not the same things. And hopefully you got that by doing the worksheet, okay? So the characteristics and functions are not the same thing. So make sure when you're reading the exam questions, you're giving me the right answer. So for example, I could ask, what's the characteristics of epithelium? And you wrote down a function, that wouldn't be right. Okay, so that's why you have to be able to distinguish the difference between characteristics versus function. Okay. The third main thing about epithelium is to be able to identify how they differ. So they differ by the number of layers and by the shape. In terms of numbering, it's either simple or stratified. Simple has 1 layer. So you have squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. A nice thing about columnar is that it oftentimes is associated with these little hairs on top of them. Okay. Stratified has 2 or more layers, and someone had talked about this. It's really hard because tissues aren't going to be positioned in the exact same way where the bottom is the bottom and the top is the top. No. That's why in order to identify stratified, you have to look for 2 main things. 1, the basement membrane, and the free surface. Okay, so the basement membrane is always lined with some type of connective tissue. And the free surface is, there's nothing attached to that layer. Okay, so here, in this case, it's this one right here. That's the basement membrane, which makes this right here the free surface. So if you go from the basement membrane up, is there 1 layer or more than 2 layers?
More than 2?
Yeah, so that's why it's stratified. What shape is it?
Cuboidal.
It's not cuboidal, actually. So
Columnar or pseudo?
it's not pseudo either. It is squamous. Okay, so that's why you always have to look at what is the base membrane and what's the free surface. Okay, let me do this to this image real quick. Can I rotate it? Here we go. So you're actually looking at it like this. Okay, so if this right here is the basement membrane, and that's the free surface, look at the shape again. What's the shape look like? It's thin and flat. And if it's thin and flat, what shape is it?
Squamous.
That's right.
Squamous.
And that's the point of this, right? Is you have to look at the basement membrane and the free surface to orient yourself to be able to determine the correct shape even.
It's kind of hard with the black and white photos, though.
Yeah.
I mean, like the drawed ones, it's easier to tell. It's a lot easier to tell, but when the real ones, it's like, unless we're looking at it like it's a vessel, or I'm sorry, a vein or something, then it makes sense. But otherwise, it kind of is confusing.
It can be, yep. And that's why it just takes a lot of practice. So you always have to find the basement membrane and the free surface, and then from there, figure out everything. So in this case right here, the second one, what would this be right here?
Are you talking about the round one in the middle? Because I'm having a hard time like seeing what you're like highlighting.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, let me see if I can zoom in. Right.
Yeah, I think, yeah, there we go. So I couldn't see what you were looking at before, so I was completely lost of what you were like even trying to point out, but now I see.
Okay, so here, Is that the basement membrane or is that the free surface?
Are we talking about the reticular or the picture underneath?
No, I'm talking about. Oh no, I can't highlight.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So do you see this green arrow? Okay, maybe I'll change the color. I'll change it to red. So this right here. Do you see my red arrow now?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Hold on.
Is that the free surface or is that the basement membrane?
The free surface.
Free
Free
surface.
Yep.
surface.
What is this on then?
The basement
That's the
membrane.
basement membrane.
So
Yeah,
between the basement membrane and the free surface, how many layers are there?
2.
2.
2.5,
Simple or
maybe 3.
stratified?
Stratified.
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 In what shape?
Cubital.
Squamous.
Yeah.
Cuboidal.
Oh, I heard it
Cuboidal?
right the first time. Cuboidal. So in this case, this would be stratified cuboidal epithelium.
Oh,
So
okay.
can you go
Well, because it
so
looks
on the
kind of smushed at the bottom.
Yes, and it will be smushed. Yep.
so
Oh, and that's a
the
good
one
point. Yo, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
so the one that you did before that had were under the word exceptions, and you said like the basement layer and then you turned it sideways. So because like looking at it like that, it looks columnar sort of. But so you're just saying if we orient the top part and the bottom, if it's open, that it's easier to tell if it's squamous,
Yes,
if that makes sense. Okay.
absolutely. And sometimes the shape changes from the bottom to the top, and you always use the shape on the top.
Okay, so our goblet cells mostly squamous, or does
No, they don't count. They're not part of the squamous. They're just an
Okay.
additional cell that's associated with this type.
okay.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
When you turned your screen, when we were talking about the expectation one,
Exception.
No,
except
we were not. We were talking about this one right here.
the first one, right? Okay. I
Yes.
was like, oh my gosh. It's like I was so lost on that one. Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was lost too. I thought you were talking about the other one too.
Yeah, no, when I flipped it, we
It
were
was
talking
hard
about
to
this
see
one.
it was hard to see your writing when it
Yeah.
was smaller.
Yep. So I go through this and the picture's much better because it's the one that you may encounter in your exams in announcements.
That's good to know. Also, just FYI, when we look at the videos for lab, it's very blurry and you can't see the board.
The board for lab?
So like she was talking about cells. I was watching the video. It was kind of grimy and then I couldn't actually see what she was writing on the whiteboard.
Yeah, so you watch these videos right here. So go to
Yeah,
announcements.
I meant like for the lab. But yeah.
Yes, I had that problem too.
Oh, for the lab?
I think
Yeah.
they're talking
This is
about the
supplement.
videos that you give us as extra videos to refer to.
Oh, the
Yeah.
supplemental ones. Yeah. So on the modules, there's the supplemental area. Yes, those are important as well. But your main video shouldn't be blurry. So for example,
Okay.
if you go to modules and we go to tissues. Oh, nope, I went too far. Here we go. Histology. So in the lab right here, so this video right here, these should not be blurry, but this one is blurry.
That one is.
Yes, because it's
Yes.
on the board. Yep. Yeah, so use these videos right here
Okay.
and then go to the announcements and use the other videos. These
I
are
was like, wow, you have the same lab assistant from like a long time ago. But I was like, I can't quite see what she's writing.
Yeah. So here, this one. Yeah, so you want to go with this one right here. These two. Particularly this one. Because this
Good
one,
to know.
yep. Yep. Okay. Go back here. Go back here. All right. So that's epithelium. Okay, so make sure you watch it because I'll go through in the video, I also go through the pseudo stratified columnar epithelium, transitional, and so on as well. For connective, same thing, make sure you know characteristics, function, Make sure you know that, you know, all connective tissue have some type of cell type, have ground substance and fibers. And between these three, that's what identifies them as what they are. So here's areolar, here's reticular, here's dense, and loose includes adipose and blood. Okay? All right. So we are running out of time. So I want to quickly go through this. Oh, let me zoom out again. Were there any questions on INTEG? I think there was only one question on INTEG. So let me briefly go through the integumentary system. This one is a lot of content, a lot of details, okay? So make sure you know the details for this chapter. Although it really does just make up 10 questions.
Good to know.
You'll see on the exam.
That was my follow-up question, actually.
I can read your mind. Okay. All right. So make sure you know structures and function, particularly of the skin, the nails, and the hair. For the skin, make sure you know the layers. It has the cutaneous membrane, then the epidermis, the dermis, and then the subcutaneous membrane. I don't think I put the subcutaneous. Oh, I know why. Because skin only includes the cutaneous membrane. That's epidermis and dermis. But then below the skin, you'll find the subcutaneous membrane, and that's where you find the hypodermis and the fat. Also, make sure you know the membranes and the glands. Okay, so here's another in-class lecture that I provided. So you can see that I went through the function of skin, the epidermal layers from superficial to deep. Oh, okay. So on the exam, oftentimes when students get this question wrong, they may know what the layers are, but they didn't read the test question. So they just automatically jumped to assuming that I asked from superficial to deep. But sometimes you may get a question that asks you to present the layers from deep to superficial. So again, pointing to the fact that you have to make sure you read the question carefully. What is the question asking? Okay. So from there, you can tell me that if it's going from superficial to deep, it starts off with stratum corneum. What's significant about that? It has keratinocytes that are dead. And at that point, it has keratin that provides the skin with the waterproof characteristics. It's the outermost one. If you're looking at thick skin, so in other words, at the palms and the soles of your feet only and nowhere else in the body, you will have this extra layer called the stratum lucidium. Okay. Following that, you'll have the stratum granulosum, the stratum bacilli. I'm missing this. There we go. So the stratum spinosum and then the stratum bacilli. I drew it out as well and I labeled it. So this is a good way to kind of study yourself. It's just to see if you can draw it and label and identify and describe. Okay. All right. Questions, how to prepare for lab, use the PDF, listen to the video. Make sure that you practice writing it out because that's going to help you with the spelling. For the lecture, use the lecture videos, the PowerPoints, and the script. But the best thing that you can do for the lecture materials is just to rewrite your notes. Of all the years I've taught this class, I've asked students repeatedly that do really well, and I ask them, what do they do? They all say, 100% of them say they rewrote their notes. Okay. So studying.
Can I say something on that?
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
So, yeah, I have test anxiety really bad. And I in my therapy sessions, you know, I discuss it with him. And he mentioned that when you rewrite your notes to use different color ink on them the second time around, or if there's, you know, something that you got wrong on a quiz or something, write that in a different color than what it was in, so it sticks out more. So, and I just have to compliment you because I have taken anatomy before and at a different school, and her tests were so dang hard and they were not covered like in the material. And since I'm a visual learner and all the things that you have us doing, labeling and doing these things, I think that's why I have so much less anxiety this time around doing it. And so I appreciate that. And I don't know if it helps anyone else, but the visual things are just like, have been helping me tremendously. And I'm not so anxious about stuff. So I appreciate you and thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing that. You students don't usually believe me until after the first exam. When I tell them it really works. The cognitive maps really works because just having something visual and connecting it to the huge amount of content, like you said, helps a lot. And actually, whoever you're seeing, tell them I said excellent, because actually that's what I recommend students. So when you do the worksheets, now not all the worksheets are part of your assignment, but I do provide worksheets every week for every chapter. You should do them as if they were your assignments. When you do the worksheets, the first time you do it without any notes in one color. Okay. The second time that you go over the same worksheet, take out your notes and add in a different color, because that's going to allow you to know what do you know from what you don't know, and you want to focus on what you don't know. Yeah. So that person, excellent. They know what they're talking about. Okay. All right, because that's exactly what I recommend students to do on the worksheets.